Hey book buddies, Katy here, and today I'm reviewing The Queen of the Tearling by Erika Johansson. So I actually got this book because it was on Emma Watson's book club list. So I really like Emma Watson, and so I tend to trust her when she recommends books, and so I picked this up because of her, and I'm glad that I did. So The Queen of the Tearling is a adult fantasy, and it follows our hero Kelsey. She is 19 years old, and she is the heir to the throne of the Tearling. So she's been hiding out in the woods, and she is being raised by these two elderly people, Barty and Carlin, and they have been raising her to prepare her for the throne. And then the day that she turns 19, the Queen's Guard comes to get her to take her to the keep where she is supposed to become the Queen of the Tearling. Now, the problem with that is that everybody wants to kill her. So the line of queens before her, all of them have been murdered because there is a rival country called Mortmesney, and they have an evil sorceress queen, and she wants them all dead because she wants to rule the Tearling. And then the regent, who is Kelsey's uncle, is also a snivelly little evil man, and he helped in the murder of Kelsey's mother. And so he has sided with the Queen of Mortmesney. So basically, Kelsey can't trust anybody except for her Queen's Guard. So the main plot of this story is just Kelsey coming into the throne and getting used to being queen and realizing all of the terrible things that have taken place in the Tearling before she's become queen, and trying to fix those things without starting a war. So a long time ago, the Mort invaded the Tearling, and they got right up to the keep, and the only reason they didn't completely take over the Tearling is because Kelsey's mother signed a treaty with them. And so Kelsey has known about this treaty since she's grown up, but when she becomes the queen, she realizes what the conditions of this treaty are and what the Tear have had to do to keep this treaty viable, and it's really horrible. And so she's trying to get around this rule that they signed in this treaty because it's awful to her people without starting a war between Mortmesney and the Tearling. I really like this world. What's interesting about this world, and I don't really think this is a spoiler because it says it on the front cover, it's set in the future. So you think it's set in feudal Middle Ages, but it's actually set in the future. Something has happened and you're not sure what it is, some sort of natural disaster, I guess. And so there was a thing called the crossing, and everybody from our world crossed over to this new place. And so this book is actually set in the future, but they didn't take all of their technology and stuff with them, and so they've kind of had to revert back to the Middle Ages, and so it's a feudal society. So I thought that was a really interesting element, and I really liked Kelsey's character a lot. She's very smart, she's really badass, she's like so cool, and when I was reading this book I felt really empowered. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be a queen, I'm gonna... This book is really violent and trigger heavy though, so be careful when you're reading it. Just about every bad thing that can happen kind of happens, because it talks about when the Mort invaded the Tear and they did a bunch of terrible stuff, and so it's really violent. It's got like sexual assault and like bad things happen to children, which I get really disturbed when bad things happen to children in books, so there were parts when I had to kind of set this book down because it was like, oh. There were actually two things in this book that really bothered me a lot, and so they kept this book from being 5 stars. I gave this book 4 stars. They're not really spoilery, so I'm just going to go ahead and tell you what they are. So as I said, this book is set in the future, and the crossing that everybody underwent to get to where they are now was from the United States and the United Kingdom. And those are both pretty racially diverse places, but the Tearling and Mortmesney are not racially diverse places at all. As a matter of fact, it says like 3 times. There's this one character named Lear, and he's kind of a minor character, but he is black, and it's mentioned several times that that's weird, that he's black. Like, nobody's ever seen a black person, and they all stare at him. And so part of me is like, okay, if this is the future, and they migrated from a place that is racially diverse, why is this place not racially diverse? Like, what happened? I read some interviews with Erika Johansson, and she was saying that she wanted to put a lot of bigotry in this book to show that just because it's in the future doesn't mean that's going to be gone. And I like that. That's good. And so she does a really good job with like sexism. I think that shows really clearly in her book. But she said that she was also trying to make some sort of commentary about racism. Okay, well, but you didn't put any people of color in the book. There's one. Are they in a different country now? Like, what? I don't understand where they all went. And so it's strange to me, because if she's trying to show racism, you kind of need people of color to display racism in your book. You can't just... And maybe the author is white, and so maybe she was afraid to go too into racism and what people of color would experience in that, because she didn't want to speak over people of color, and I get that. That's a valid argument. But it just really, really bothered me that there were no people of color in this book. And this is the first book in a trilogy, so I'm sure in one of the other books she will explain why there aren't any people of color. I'm gonna need an explanation, and it's gonna have to be a pretty good one, otherwise I'm gonna be kind of angry, because that's just, I don't know, it just bothered me. The other thing that bothered me about this book is, okay, so Kelsey is great throughout the entire book. She's 19, and sometimes she makes rash decisions. She's very chaotic good. She's like the definition of a chaotic good character. And so sometimes she does things that aren't really the smartest thing to do, but she's doing it because she thinks they're the right thing to do. And she's usually really, really, really intelligent, and she thinks about her decisions. She's really self-sufficient. She's not a perfect character, but she's a good character, and she's got a good head on her shoulders. But every so often, when this character called the Fetch comes into play, Kelsey just becomes stupid. So the Fetch is like this criminal. He's like a thief, murderer, like Robin Hood sort of character, except he's not really as good as Robin Hood. He's just sort of like a neutral criminal, and for whatever reason, Kelsey just has this huge infatuation with him, and you don't really know why, because it doesn't describe him as being all that great. I mean, Erika Johansson tells us through Kelsey's eyes that he is handsome, but we don't know why. Like, we don't get any descriptions of him other than he's handsome. And he's a lot older than Kelsey, and he doesn't do anything that would make her like him. He just kind of, just exists. And whenever she's around him, she's just head over heels. She doesn't think about what she's doing. She tells him things she doesn't need to be telling him. Like, everybody wants to kill her. Why does she trust this guy? So she trusts him just because she thinks he's cute. And, like, every time she thinks about him, she's like, oh, I'm not pretty enough, and I wonder what he would think of this decision that I'm making in this country that I rule over. And it's like, why do you care? Like, it's just the way that she acts around him. Like, it's okay that she thinks he's kind of attractive, but, like, she just completely abandons all sort of common sense when she's around him, and it annoyed me. I'm like, Kelsey, pull yourself together. So those were two things that kind of kept this book from being 5 stars, but everything else about this book was really, really good. Like I said, really love the world building. I really love the characters. I really like the story and where it's going, and I can't wait to get my hands on the next book. So I'm definitely going to continue the series, and I'll let you know what I think of it. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and if you liked this video, please feel free to click that like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I will see you all again very, very soon with a new video, but until then, happy reading. Bye!